Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of the live stream, the subcommittee has been in private session. It's excluded the public whilst it viewed video footage that's been, CCTV footage that's been taken by residents of showing generally the antisocial behaviour outside the premises. There are some issues that have arisen with that footage, primarily that a large or substantial part of it has not been served on the premises licence holder in advance of the hearing today, and accordingly my advice, Chair, is that you very clearly offer an opportunity. I know that Mr Walsgrove has taken some steps to consult his client during the course of the adjournment that you granted during the private session, but if I feel you ought to offer him the opportunity either to take further instructions in light of him and his client having now viewed footage that was not served in advance of the hearing. It's regrettable that this was not served. Having checked on the hearings regulations, ordinarily we're often faced with a situation where a party to the hearing is trying to produce evidence on the day that the parties have not seen, and in those circumstances that would require the consent of all the parties to be viewed. However, this is slightly different insofar as the parties to the hearing, whether they're here today or not, that may have made written representations, have submitted this to the licensing authority in advance of the hearing, so they have complied with the hearing regulations, and accordingly it's not a question of whether all the parties consent, but however, for the interests of natural justice, my advice is absolutely clear that you offer the opportunity of either a short adjournment now, if it's felt needed, or indeed a longer adjournment for Mr Walsgrove to take instructions. I hope that all makes sense. Obviously, take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr Attrell. I'm more than happy to ask Mr Walsgrove if he needs to take further instruction or anything similar, or would like an adjournment, a short adjournment or a longer adjournment, which means ending the meeting today. Any questions for anyone before I do that? No? Mr Walsgrove.
Thank you, Chair. I have taken instructions. Regrettably, the prejudice suffered by the licence holder in not having that information disclosed is not going to be rectified by an adjournment, because his CCTV systems record footage for 31 days and then they're overwritten effectively. That's the condition on his licence, to keep it for 31 days, so we can't trace back any of that information, which we could have done had we had them at the time. And in relation to what you've seen, it sits with the representations we were going to make in any event, so I should be able to conduct his case as I intended to, although clearly I do want it noted and will submit to you in due course that substantial prejudice has been caused in this case.
Thank you very much, Mr Walsgrove. Members, I do have questions for Mr Stone, which I have written down since I wasn't going to ask you any questions, but I've realised. So could I come back to you and ask you some questions? Not about the videos, it's about his original report. Mr Stone, there is another convenience store by the Crossroads on Albert Road. I think it's the Rainbow Convenience Store. I know they sell alcohol a little bit later into the evening too. Do you know what time that is?
I do have the licence here, if I can find it, but it is till 0200 hours in the morning.
Thank you very much. Also, are the Quickie Mart mandated to have door staff? And if we took a decision today, are we able to do anything regarding the licence and door staff?
There's not a condition on the licence with regard to door staff. There is a condition that 3 members of staff, and one has to be a personal licence holder, is present up until 0600 in the morning, I believe. It's in your bundle. If you have a look at the bundle itself, you've got a copy of the licence and the conditions.
With regards to that, are we just deciding about specifically about alcohol sale by alcohol by retail, or we can add conditions to the licence?
You've got several options available, but you can add conditions, yes. You can amend it, modify the conditions, or exclude or reduce licensable activities. So those are the options to you. You could remove the DPS, but that isn't really an issue for this hearing, or you can suspend the licence or revoke it. So those are the options open to you, should you deem that appropriate.
Thank you. Any other questions from anyone then, since I asked some questions at that point? Thank you very much. Gone through. We did get to the point where everyone did ask a question of Mr. Stone, didn't we? So thank you. I'm just going through my paper. It's easier in my head rather than doing it on paper. We'll now move to the applicant's case. Hello, Mrs. Whiteway. Now's for you to take the floor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to stress that, as reported in the local newspaper, my application was to have the alcohol licence removed, which is not the case. It's trying to find a common ground to obviously stop the antisocial behaviour that does occur outside the Quickie Mart. I have been on several occasions in contact with the police to get them to act, because I appreciate this is outside the premises, not within the premises of the Quickie Mart. But that doesn't seem to have resolved anything. I have viewed on a couple of occasions where I've called the police for assistance, and they've just drove past. Not stopped, not made any physical, verbal contact with anybody, causing any disturbance outside the store. So therefore I've gone down this route. As in the application, I have stated about the antisocial behaviour of noise, crowd, urinating, rubbish, just general misery for anybody living in the area. As previously stated, I'm not looking for the alcohol licence to be completely removed. I'm looking or reflecting on the possibility of the closure of the shop of a particular time, early hours of the morning, to fall in line with pubs and restaurants in the local area, say 2 o'clock in the morning, reopen obviously 6, 7 in the morning, or the stop of alcohol sales between early hours of morning of those times again. Obviously the draw to this store, because they sell alcohol 24/7, people think they can just continue partying outside, causing misery to everybody that lives in the local area. I've lived within the area for 7 years. I like the area. I've got no intentions of wanting to move. But Albert Road goes through a highly populated residential area, of which we all suffer the backlash of what happens outside this store. I know there is an argument to be said that it happens outside the store, not inside. But I do believe they do have some form of need to be able to control the people that congregate outside. As seen by my videos, you can see that alcohol is being purchased inside and consumed outside. The display of the blue plastic carrier bags, also evidence that things get purchased inside and just left all over the place. This is obviously commonly known with local council refuge, because around about 7 o'clock every morning, the road sweepers come along to clean the street, and then within an hour the street road clearers come along and clear the remaining rubbish on the pavement, highlighting that they know the mess and destruction outside the premises, so therefore they come along and collect it. So as previously stated, this is not the request for the alcohol licence to be removed. I would just like there to be some form of consideration for the general public that live within the area, and why should we have to put up with this antisocial behaviour? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Whiteway. We'll then enter members' questions. If I could start. I am an occasional patron of Albert Road on some evenings through the year, and sometimes I have visited the establishment, the Quickie Mart, after places have shut down Albert Road to purchase alcohol, whatever, like the majority of people use that store for at that time in the morning. So from what I've seen, it looks different to what it's like when I go there at, say, 1, 1:30, 2 in the morning, because you get kind of like a kick-out time with pubs, so you have a lot more people going. But this looks different to me. So do you have issues with the pub kick-out times and people are queuing, so like people are just literally going in, buying alcohol and leaving again, which the majority do? And how is that different to what we're seeing in your video footage?
I've got no objection for people going in, buying alcohol. I've been in there myself. Obviously, it's a convenient supermarket. It's across the road from me. So I've used the shop on many occasions. Pubs in the area or restaurants are open until 2 o'clock in the morning. I know where I live. It's on a busy main street. That is not my issue. I feel as a resident within the area, we shouldn't have to put up with the behaviour after those certain times. It attracts people that want to stay up roaming the streets to continue partying outside. As obviously was viewed, and you could hear by the footage of loud music which comes out of cars that just pull up and they just continue to party on the street. My argument is, if they weren't able to purchase alcohol, then the attraction wouldn't be there, and I probably wouldn't be sitting here now stating my case.
Thank you. Also, you said that you had contacted the police many times. I just want you to reiterate whether they've helped you or not, because I feel like there is a lot of antisocial behaviour happening, especially in the videos that I've seen, and it makes me wonder why the police haven't turned up today, but that's a whole different discussion. I just want to know, if they have supplied you with help, what help have they supplied you with, and what the general feel for yourself is around the police helping you with this?
Unfortunately, I can't remember the policeman's name, but I have had communication from the police that are connected to the licensing office with yourselves, and they were looking into my issues, and they said they were going to be looking into it. On one particular evening, like I said, the police rode past 6 times without stopping, so I feel they've let me down as a resident. Clearly antisocial behaviour, drinking in the street, loud music, gatherings, urinating, complete no consideration for anybody. The police said that they might have been on their way to a more pressing situation. Virtually on every occasion they just cruised past. There was no blues and twos, and they stopped at the traffic lights, which indicates to myself there wasn't a pressing situation. Each time they drove past, they just laughed and done some suggestive hand signals to the police cars as they drove past.
Thank you. Another question of, we're encouraged not to read any news before these meetings. We just get our pack, and obviously we've seen the videos today. So I didn't know if you wanted to go into some discussions. I've read in the pack that you have tried to approach each other to a degree, or you've tried to approach that way, as far as I know.
Correct. After the first review was submitted, it wasn't validly made, and so it had to be resubmitted, and we asked to meet with the applicant to discuss the concerns, and she refused.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, because you said that you felt like you wanted negotiations, not to press you on anything. Have you made a conscious decision not to meet with people before any of this, or have you not? Do you feel like you've not been approached?
I don't remember refusing to meet and discuss with anybody.
Okay. We can leave it there, that's fine.
Chair, I think I probably should also step in and just say I wouldn't encourage discussion of what may or may not have been in the press. That's not...
No, I was just sort of reiterating that we don't read the press because you brought up
Absolutely,
the fact that,
and I wouldn't seek to try to introduce it at the committee today.
So we only get
the subcommittee needs to focus its attention on the evidence that it's heard. And has been validly submitted in representations. Just one point of clarification, Chair, in relation to the applicant's request that the hours of trading for the business be restricted. And this ties in with the question that you put to Mr. Stone earlier. If I remember rightly, I think the only licensable activity, and I'm sure I will be corrected if I'm wrong, the only licensable activity on the premises licence is the sale of alcohol for consumption off the premises, I would presume. I don't think there's any late night refreshment or anything of that nature. No, so it's simply the sale of alcohol. That is the licensable activity that the subcommittee is considering and has the power to control or regulate. It does not have the power to control the opening hours of the premises or the existence of the premises as a shop. So a general convenience store does not need a licence from the local authority. I appreciate you are well aware of this, but I'm explaining this obviously for the benefit of...
No, it's very helpful knowledge, and obviously this meeting is public and...
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
So I hope that makes sense as to the remit. What the subcommittee could potentially do today is to impose conditions or to restrict the hours or indeed to revoke the licence at the extreme, so far as it relates to the sale of alcohol at the premises.
Would I be right in saying if we, closure of a venue would be like a planning decision anyway? Surely to restrict hours that a premises operates would be a whole different ballpark to what we can do, surely?
That certainly could fall within the planning remit. Obviously, no, it's quite all right. The use of the premises in planning terms is a completely separate function to the licensing function. So the hours at the premises as a shop could be open, could be regulated by the planning regime.
Thank you.
I should just add, given that is legal advice you've received, it could be regulated, but there aren't planning regulations restricting the opening hours. This is a 24-hour shop. It will forevermore be a 24-hour shop. Planning can't come in and then say, well, actually, we're going to change your hours retrospectively.
Thank you. Mrs. Waterway, did you get that? Just making sure.
Yes.
Members, do you have any questions?
Thank you much. You made mention of the music. I'll just ascertain where the music is coming from. Is it people bringing their own speakers? Is it from the shop or?
It's from vehicles that park up out the front. On a couple of occasions, mobile phones, but it's generally cars pull up out the front, their windows are wound down, they turn up the volume, and it's just loud music on the street for them to, they bop around to.
And is that vehicles of clients who are going in to purchase stuff in the shop, or is it just people pulling up to?
Yes, they do jump out, go in the shop, hang around out the front. They could be there anything, the length of time it takes to go in to purchase stuff, have a quick chat and go. Sometimes they can be there 10, 15, 20 minutes. And again, you've seen the videos and you've heard the music yourself, and that's me filming just literally with my window just slightly cranked open, and I don't have a top-notch modern phone, and it's obviously picking up the noise quite clearly.
Councillor Holder, do you have any questions?
Has this been consistently going on since you've lived there, or has it got worse recently, or has it always been this situation?
It's got worse. This summer, it's anything 5-6 nights a week, and they just literally gather mid-evening, and as shown again, go on to about 8 o'clock in the morning.
Thank you. I'm seeing who was next on the applicants. Miss Humphreys, do you have any questions at all?
No, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mason, do you have any questions at all?
No, Madam Chairman, I do not.
Thank you very much. Mr Walsgrove, do you have any questions at all?
I don't have any questions, but that doesn't mean that we agree with anything that's been said.
Thank you very much. I think that's it. Sometimes we may come back and ask you questions, especially right near the end if things running through our heads before we adjourn to make a decision anyway. But thank you. It's the responsible authorities case, which in this case is Miss Humphreys, who is licensing manager for Portsmouth City Council.
Thank you, Chair. Members, as you have in your reporting pack, the licensing authority has made a representation in respect of this application, and the grounds for this representation relate to the prevention of crime and disorder and the prevention of public nuisance. Excuse me. As my representation points out, review applications must relate to particular premises and relevant to the promotion of one of more of the licensing objectives. And to assist the panel in my representation, I have referred to paragraph 11.7 of the statutory guidance. I won't repeat it, but it is available on page 25 of your pack. So in essence, it means that reviews cannot be used to address general issues in a local area. It can only be used if they can be possibly tied or causally linked to a particular premises. In making this representation, the licensing authority believes that the review application has established a causal link between antisocial behaviour, public nuisance. The link has been made to these premises. You've also been provided with further evidence in my representation in relation to incidents occurring at the premises and directly outside these premises, and they are in your report. An officer of the licensing service also visited the premises on 16th of October from 0300 hours, and a report on his observations is set out on pages 33 and 34 of your pack. It is accepted that the police have not made representations, but I would point out to the committee that other responsible authorities, including the licensing authority, are entitled to make representations in relation to the promotion of the licensing objectives. I consider that the recorded incidents demonstrate that crime and disorder, public nuisance, including antisocial behaviour, is having a negative impact on residents living in that area. But I accept it is for the committee to decide today to what extent that is. Reference has been made in my report to a previous review in 2014, but at that time there was insufficient evidence available to the licensing subcommittee, which would have perhaps justified steps being taken by the committee at that time. However, it's my view that this application provides sufficient evidence for you to consider modifying the licence. Previous licensing history has also been provided to you in relation to these premises, as well as relevant case law which you might wish to take into account when considering your decision, and obviously your legal advisor will be able to guide you as regards those cases. In summary, members, having regard to the review application and associated evidence provided to the Licence 2U panel today, the licensing authority requests that you give consideration to reducing the sale of alcohol at these premises to 0100 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Humphreys. I do have a question. I don't want to drop any other licensed premises in it, but Quickie Mart is next door to the Royal Albert. Have you received complaints of a similar ilk with that establishment?
So the information that I have been provided with, which is contained in my report, specifically relates to the Quickie Mart or directly outside the Quickie Mart, and no reference is made to nuisance caused by other premises in retrieving that information.
Thank you. I just wanted to know if you were getting complaints of that venue around similar things, because obviously it's next door and it's next door effectively, isn't it?
I can confirm we've got no reference of complaints related to that particular licensed premises.
Thank you. Members' questions? Mr. Holt, Councillor Holt.
I think Mr. Stone mentioned that the Rainbow store down the road was licensed until 2 a.m. Why are you asking for 1 a.m. for Quickie Mart?
It was in line with the representations and the application for the review that time was suggested. So I concur with the applicant for the review that 100 hours. However, if the committee feel a different time, that's obviously for your decision.
Councillor Mason, any questions?
Yes, I don't know if I missed it, but shutting at 1, but what time would you suggest restarting?
I didn't actually, so thank you, Councillor, because it's 24 hours. It doesn't seem to be, as it's a 24-hour store, the store could remain open even without the sale of alcohol. So again, I suppose it would be a matter for you to decide at what time alcohol sales could be resumed. I'm familiar that premises tend to have a 7 a.m. Normal off licence is a 7 a.m. start.
I was just going to say it's the representation we've had was suggesting a 6 or a 7, so you'd say that would be in line with normal.
Indeed, Councillor.
Thank you. Mrs Whitaway, do you have any questions of Ms Humphreys?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mason, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Mr Walsgrove, do you have any questions?
Please, just one. In relation to the information that you've included in your representation, the incidents, that was information given to you by Hampshire Constabulary, is that right?
Yes, it was. It was information contained on their OMS system.
Did you ask for the same information for the Royal Albert, the Rainbow stores and any other premises in Albert Road?
No, I didn't.
Thank you. No other questions.
Any other questions before I move on to Mr Walsgrove? Oh, the other person's case, Mr Councillor Mason. Hello, Councillor Mason. We have read what is in the pack, but feel free to keep it within what you've said. Please don't say anything new, because you know the drill, don't you? Thank you.
I wish to expand a little on what I have put into the pack. Chairman, I think this morning you are dealing with an unusual set of circumstances. As the local ward councillor, I have received numerous complaints concerning behaviour outside the shop over the years. They have become more frequent recently, and invariably they centre on the unseemly behaviour of some of its patrons, and occasionally also about the persistent and aggressive behaviour of beggars close to the ATM machine. The shop internally appears to be very well managed and run, but its security staff seem to be ill-equipped to deal with unruly customers. Moreover, the fact that it has a 24-hour licence means that people will arrive, often very noisily, and often clearly having been drinking elsewhere, to purchase alcohol when pubs and other establishments have ceased serving. Walking home in the small hours, as I occasionally do down Albert Road, I see people sitting and drinking in the bus shelter opposite New Quickie Mart, arguing noisily in the street, and sometimes sitting on the pavement, or in two cases lying on the pavement in the street, creating quite a noise and producing public nuisance. The kebab takeaway, which is open until 4 a.m., does not appear to be linked to the consumption of alcohol. People may take a takeaway, but the main reason they come to New Quickie Mart at these hours is to buy alcohol. Now, I live some 3 streets away, but even I am disturbed by very loud people, slowly, far too slowly, making their way up Chelsea Road from Albert Road at 3, 4 and 5 in the morning. These people are not coming from church prayer meetings. They have quite clearly been buying alcohol on Albert Road, and this is evidenced by the discarded cans, and the discarded cans, unfortunately, for particular kinds of lager, which are sold extensively in New Quickie Mart, which I find in my forecourt, and support the supposition that people are drinking heavily on the street, and not just on Albert Road, having purchased the alcohol there. Now, the whole area is a residential area where families with small children live. Their lives are disturbed by late-night purchasing and drinking of alcohol in the street, and this does produce a public nuisance. I do not know whether under the terms of the current legislation you can do anything to curb this excess. If you can, I think that the residents of Albert Road, Oxford Road and the surrounding area would be very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. This leads me on a question, if I may, to ask Derek Stone, the licensing officer, more about high ABV sales, because I know the Quickie Mart, I've read in the papers about you adopting the voluntary thing to say you won't say, is it above 8.5 or something? 6.5. What's the strength of the high, like the Carlsberg, the stuff that they do buy, the stronger strength lagers and stuff like that? Maybe I might ask to say if you sell those things. No.
If we've got the conditional licence, some off-licences have agreed to this 6.5% maximum strength alcohol. But some of the strong lagers that are sold in premises where that condition doesn't apply can be anything up to 8.5, 9%. So I'm not quite sure what it is you're trying to establish.
Councillor Mason, you said about the cans of strong alcohol. I don't know if you can mention any brands. No. It just flagged up a little bit. I can understand that they're but yeah, I know that...
Madam Chairman, may I correct you? I did not suggest it was strong alcohol. I suggest it was alcohol of particular brands. The different shops on Albert Road sell different brands of alcohol, and those of us who do occasionally, very occasionally, drink alcohol do know where they come from.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. Sorry, I was getting myself at it possibly then. Members, any questions? Mrs. Whiteway, any questions? Ms. Humphreys, any questions? Any questions of Mr. Walsgrove?
Councillor Mason, which brand of alcohol are you talking about?
There are brands of alcohol from Poland and Eastern Europe which are frequently sold in New Quickie Mart, and I find them not infrequently in my front garden.
And you're suggesting that no other shop in Portsmouth sells?
No, I am not suggesting that. I would not suggest that, sir. But what I am suggesting that there is a certain likelihood that they, at that hour of the morning, if they are dropped into my front garden, that they come from the premises on Albert Road, which sells them.
Thank you. No other questions.
Thank you. Sorry, I feel like that was my fault partially there for asking that question in the first place. Right. We'll now move on to the premises licence holder's case, which will be Mr. Walsgrove. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the presentation, effectively in 3 parts. So the first is to address you on law, which I know you probably won't want to hear, but trust me, it's a very simple explanation, just going through the Secretary of State's guidance, your own policy and a quick reference to the two cases that the licensing officer has put in her representation. So nothing complicated, but all important things that in your decision you're required to take into account by the Licensing Act. So I'll just address you on the law briefly, which will put into context then the discussion around the evidence before concluding with some points that I want to put on behalf of the licence holder in terms of the way the store is run and some of those local issues which have arisen in this application. So starting with the law, I'm sure you're aware, but I just want to make it clear for the interested parties, the burden of proof is on the applicant, so on Miss Whiteaway. It's for her to prove this case. Aranan is not here to prove anything at all, and you have to be satisfied to a standard of proof which is on the balance of probabilities, which essentially means more likely than not. I think the issue in the case is a narrow one. We've heard from the applicant and also from the interested parties, it's not that they're seeking a consideration for revocation or suspension of the licence. They would like the hours of the sale of alcohol cut back. So that's effectively what you're being asked to consider. And as Mr. Stone pointed out, you also, you also have the power to revise any of the conditions on the premises licence, or you could add conditions. And I think you yourself mentioned one about SIA, whether you could add that as a condition, which is within your remit. So we're dealing with, should alcohol be sold at this premises for 24 hours a day? And it's for the interested parties and for the applicant to prove it's more likely than not that the antisocial behaviour which they are alleging is happening in Albert Road is specifically linked to purchase of alcohol from Quickie Mart. And essentially it's our case that they cannot do that to the required standard of proof on the evidence that you've seen. Let me just run through the relevant sections of the Secretary of State's guidance and your policy. And as I said, Section 4, Subsection 3 of the Licensing Act requires you to have account of both that statutory guidance and also your policy. It doesn't say in what degree or measure, but in my view, because it doesn't say so, you should consider them in equal measure. And certainly in the guidance it says that where a licensing authority is going to depart from the Secretary of State's guidance, then it certainly should give good reasons why you are doing so. Your legal advisor might just want to make a note of the paragraphs that I'm going to refer to, so that when you retire, if you want to refresh your memory, I will quote. I'm not going to quote every single line of each of the paragraphs I'm going to quote, because otherwise we would be here till goodness knows when. But you might then want to just have a look at those when you retire again. So I'll announce each as I go through. So in relation to the Secretary of State's guidance at paragraph 1.5, that says the legislation supports a number of key aims and purposes. These are vitally important and should be principal aims for everyone involved in licensing work. And then it sets out what some of those key aims are, and the two I want to draw your attention to are protecting the public and local residents from crime, antisocial behaviour and noise caused by irresponsible licensed premises, and recognising the important role licensed premises play in our local communities by minimising the regulatory burden on business and supporting responsible premises. And that's the key point. This shop is not an irresponsible premises, it is a responsible premises, and on the evidence adduced to you today, you should certainly not be looking to cut its hours. Again, in the section 182 guidance, paragraph 1.8, the police remain the key enforcers of licensing law. And as you'll hear from me in due course, the fact that they haven't made a representation and the discussion I had with them over this application, you should attach significant weight to that view. Paragraph 2.1 of the Secretary of State's guidance mirrors your own council's policy at paragraph 23.10, and that says licensing authorities should look to the police as the main source of advice on crime and disorder. So not the licensing officer from the licensing authority, but from the police. Paragraph 2.21 of the Section 182 guidance, beyond the immediate area surrounding the premises, these are matters for the personal responsibility of individuals under the law. Any individual who engages in antisocial behaviour is accountable in their own right. Significant that this is happening outside the shop and not inside the shop, and we say has nothing to do with us selling alcohol. It is those clips you've seen. We're not suggesting for 1 minute that isn't antisocial behaviour, but what we say is that is not happening 5 to 6 nights a week, and it's people who are coming to the area either when pubs are closing, returning from their nights out from elsewhere within Portsmouth, or indeed when I refer you to one of the video clips, they are people who actually arrive at the premises with alcohol already and consume it outside. Paragraph 9.3, Section 182 guidance, the authority's determination should be evidence-based. So you have to look at the credibility and quality of the evidence that you've heard today. Paragraph 10.15, Section 182 guidance, shops should normally be free to provide sales of alcohol for consumption off the premises at any time when the retail outlet is open, unless there are good reasons based on the licensing objectives for restricting these hours, and by reference to the previous paragraph that those reasons are evidentially based. Paragraph 11.7 of the guidance, a complaint regarding a general issue in the local area relating to the licensing objectives such as general crime and disorder situation in a town centre should generally not be regarded as a relevant representation unless it can be positively tied or linked by a causal connection to particular premises. And I think the licensing officer pointed you to the same paragraph, and that's key. It has to do with the sale of alcohol. You would have to be satisfied that the sale of alcohol in the early hours of the morning is causing that behaviour of individuals outside the shop, and we say the evidence just simply isn't there to support that contention. In relation to reviews specifically, the guidance at 11.17 and replicated in your own policy at 24.17, the licensing authority may decide that the review does not require it to take any further steps. And that is our submission to you today, that you take no action in this case, as your colleagues did back in 2014 when similar allegations were made against Quickie Mart. Paragraph 11.20, again replicated in your own policy at paragraph 24.20, it is expected that licensing authorities should, so far as possible, seek to establish the cause or causes of the concerns that the representations identify. The remedial action should generally be directed at those causes. Paragraph 14.13 of guidance replicated in your policy at paragraph 4.8. A statement of policy should also make clear that licensing law is not the primary mechanism for the general control of nuisance and antisocial behaviour by individuals once they are away from licensed premises. And paragraph 14.47 of the guidance replicated at your policy at paragraph 15.1, that's where lists of other mechanisms which are available to control antisocial behaviour are given as examples, and you may want to refresh your memory as to what some of those measures are. So that deals with the guidance, deals with the relevant parts of your policy. The licensing officer has, in her representation, made reference to 2 cases. Both of those cases involve nightclubs, and in fact very large capacity nightclubs, so entirely different in nature and character from a convenience store, with entirely different issues facing them. And for that reason alone, this case is distinguishable and reliance should not be placed on either of the two cases. Both those cases involve the impact of large numbers of people leaving those premises and the dispersal of those customers into the areas within the vicinity of the premises, and how much that led to antisocial behaviour from those groups of people having consumed alcohol in those premises, and then over 1,000, I think in the two examples, between 1,000 and 2,000 people being out on the street in drink at the same time. Clearly not the scenario at Quickie Mart. In relation to that, in terms of whether it's customers or not, we submit that there hasn't been, the burden of proof has not been satisfied, or the standard of proof has not been satisfied, in that there isn't clear evidence that the people that you've seen on the video clips have purchased alcohol from within the Quickie Mart premises and then consumed it outside. Clearly the substantial prejudice we have had in not having any of those clips is that, as I said, the CCTV is not available now. I will address you shortly in relation to the one clip where we were able to trace back from when those individuals that you saw urinate in the street, how that situation arose. So just looking at that evidence now, the first point I want to make about the evidence is going back to my point about the police not making a representation to this application, and certainly they made no representation on the last occasion this premises licence was reviewed. I contacted Acting Sergeant Rackham to discuss the case specifically. I wanted to know at a very early stage what the view of the police were, and he was unequivocal in his reply that, in his view, the issues of antisocial behaviour which are happening outside Quickie Mart and in the immediate vicinity cannot be linked to the sale of alcohol from Quickie Mart. So that's the view of the police, and that's the responsible authority who you are required by the Secretary of State's guidance to look as your number one source of advice on crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour. They say it cannot be linked to the sale of alcohol at these premises. The second, in relation to the video clips you've seen, my respectful submission is that none of those clips actually show purchases of alcohol from Quickie Mart and then consumption of people of alcohol on the street. Certainly in relation to the clip you saw from Ross Lee, all that showed was a group of people outside, and if you looked at it closely, they are in fact eating food which we can only assume has come from the Ken's Kebab, which is not uncommon for people who've been out on a night out to go to Ken's Kebabs, and then they either stand outside Ken's Kebabs, or they'll stand outside Quickie Mart, or they'll stand at the bus stop, or wherever it is they want to stay and eat before they then leave to go home. But certainly there wasn't anybody drinking, and I'm sure Ross Lee would have drawn your attention to the fact if he thought there were any people there who had purchased alcohol and were causing antisocial behaviour, which he doesn't do. He does say in his report that there is someone in the shop who he considers to be drunk, who is looking at the alcohol, and that he gives advice that the person should not be served. Well, I can assure you that all the staff at Quickie Mart are trained, and in fact the majority have been trained by Portsmouth City Council, and they know they're not supposed to serve people who are intoxicated. They do get people who are in drink coming into Quickie Mart from their night out. They're not buying alcohol, and if they tried to, they would be refused. But people come in, they buy cigarettes, tobacco, they'll buy soft drinks, bottles of water, they'll buy snacks to eat on their way home rather than go to Ken's Kebabs. So we're not saying for 1 minute that people who come to Quickie Mart are always sober and acting completely normally and appropriately. This is a 24-hour convenience store, and yes, it is used by people who have been out on a night out. But what we do say is that we manage that process properly. You've heard from Councillor Mason, in fact, that he says it's a well-managed premises, and that some of the issues that are happening outside are not because they're selling alcohol to individuals, and in fact they're not matters on which you should expect Quickie Mart staff to be dealing with. They are matters for the police to deal with, and using the mechanisms that are set out in the guidance in your policy. So they could quite easily apply for a street drinking order for that section of Albert Road, then be able to come and confiscate alcohol if people are drinking in the street. Quickie Mart does not sell alcohol to allow customers to drink it outside, and that's not a situation which they say happens. In relation to people turning up in cars and having their music on loud, again, the staff are in the shop. If they're aware that one of the customers has come in and they're in a car that's had loud music, they do ask the customer to make sure the music is turned down. But that doesn't happen very often, and obviously if the staff are serving customers within the store, it's not always easy to go out and identify whether someone's turned up in a car that's playing loud music. And you saw a video clip earlier simply of some music playing. Well, we don't know where the vehicle was, we don't know where it was coming from, we don't know whether that customer had gone into Quickie Mart. It's all assumptions being made, and it's a case, in my experience, when someone puts in a review, of effectively just saying whatever happens in this local area, it's because of whatever premises it is being reviewed. So, for example, if the Royal Albert pub had been facing a review today, a lot of what's been said is caused by Quickie Mart. The residents would be saying, well, that's because of the Royal Albert drinking in the street, carrying on their parties, etc., etc. Just going back to Ross Lee's report, because I dare say you may have frowned upon his report about the fact that Mr. Aranan did not have his personal licence to produce to him at the time, as is required, and also that the premises licence was not the current licence. Just in relation to Mr. Lee's visit, when he went into the premises, he asked to see Aranan, who works 7 nights a week at this shop. He is a personal licence holder and also an SIA badge holder, and he effectively does that night shift, which is to comply with the condition which is on the current premises licence, and of course because particularly on Fridays and Saturdays there is a higher risk of this antisocial behaviour outside his shop, and where they have had issues of persons begging, as Councillor Mason alluded to, and homeless persons sitting outside the shop, so that he can assist his staff in dealing with those issues. So in relation to his personal licence, Ross Lee came into the shop, asked the staff to speak to him, and the staff said he was taking a comfort break in the toilet. Mr. Lee then stood outside the door of the toilet, continuing talking to the member of staff, which frankly I find inappropriate, that he would stand immediately outside the door of a toilet while someone is taking a comfort break. And then when Mr. Aranan emerged from the toilet, told him that he'd spent too long in that facility, which again I would say is not an appropriate comment to make. I mention that because Mr. Aranan, knowing that a review was pending and now having been criticised for taking too long in the toilet, was now in somewhat of a state of panic. So when he was asked to produce his personal licence, all he could find was a copy of that personal licence. He knew the personal licence was on the premises, and he tried to look for it, but could not lay his hands on it. And in fact, he then emailed me at 4:17 in the morning with his personal license and said, I'm just sending you this email just to prove that I did have it. I just couldn't lay my hands on it at the time that Ross was in the premises, and that he said he couldn't wait for him to find it and had left a short while after. So I think Mr. Lee, entered the premises at about 3:45 in the morning. So this was about half an hour later. The premises license he had, obviously the local authority had been sending through soft copies and hard copies. He had both copies. So in 2014, the licensing authority reissued a premises license. Not sure why they didn't need to, but they did. And then it was 2014 when he put in his application to add the condition for the Reduce the Strength campaign, so no beers over 6.5%. And so another licence was issued about 6 weeks after he'd received the one with the review. And the only difference between the two licenses is that one condition. Everything else is identical, save for the premises licence number, which had the date 14/ and then the reference number, Prem Review, and then Prem Minor, I think was the new one. So in terms of the summary that was on display within the premises, that is identical, save for the number in the top right-hand corner. So all the hours and the sale of alcohol as the licensable activity were identical. So yes, it's accepted he couldn't produce it at the time, but I would say there was a reasonable excuse why not, and in fact it was at the premises, and he proved by emailing to me that it was in his possession. And in relation to not having the correct premises licence, they were both issued within a few weeks of each other. He did in fact have both premises licence, because again he emailed me and said, I've got these two premises licences, but I showed Mr. Lee the review one. I would say that is effectively a case of trying to throw as much mud at this application as they possibly can. And that's compounded by the fact that they make reference to a written warning that was given 7 years ago. So given a written warning, so it's not a criminal conviction. If he'd had a criminal conviction, that would be spent in any event, and they wouldn't be able to reference it, because they're not suggesting for one moment in the representation that anything to do with what's happening outside the shop is down to Mr. Aranan's ability as a personal licence holder. So there's no link between the two, and that's the only occasion on which it would be relevant to raise effectively what is a spent conviction. And again, I say that's just a situation of trying to throw as much mud at this application and see what sticks, and I think is extremely unfair and extremely prejudicial. That information should not have been included in the representation, and I ask you to take absolutely no account of it whatsoever. In relation to the licensing officer's representation, that's not even her own evidence. She's asked the police to give you the logs. So it's not even hearsay evidence, it's second-hand hearsay evidence about the weakest form of evidence you could possibly have before you, unless you get to third or fourth-hand hearsay. I've never dealt with a case with second-hand hearsay, to be honest, so I would say the credibility of looking at what's written in those reports and being able to satisfy yourself that those are facts which are more likely than not to have happened, I say you cannot do. And in fact, you will see that in some of the reports, the police say on occasion when they've attended, nothing was happening. Those are essentially people telephoning the police and an operator at the other end then recording a summary of that conversation in their own words, not in the words of the person that's reporting the crime. There's no taking of witness statements. There's been no follow-up with the police to ask whether they further investigated any of these complaints, whether there are witness statements available. All they've done is give you a list of some telephone calls, the vast majority of which are outside the shop, and the vast majority of which, if not all, do not have any relationship to the sale of alcohol from Quickie Mart. So lots of the issues raised, yes, they might be relevant to antisocial behaviour, but none go to prove that alcohol is being sold to the individuals that are concerned in those reports. Not only that, I'm surprised to see a representation from the licensing authority, given there's been no engagement with the premises since, or no concerns and engagement since the last review. So a period of 7 years, and this shop trades without issues from the licensing authority, trades without issues from the police authority, and in fact Sergeant Rackham in his conversation with me commended the store. Oh yes, Aranan always willing to work with the police, because Aranan has complained to the police about the people outside, both in terms of the homeless individuals and antisocial behaviour, and as you know, was the first to adopt the Reduce the Strength campaign. So how, after no engagement whatsoever for all that period of time, to then make a representation on the back of what is very scant information in a review is quite surprising. The police licensing officer, as I said, was unequivocal when he said to me, none of what has been said can be linked to the sale of alcohol, and that's your decision today. You've got to look at the evidence, and if you want to take action in this case, you're going to have to be satisfied that it's more likely than not that antisocial behaviour is happening on a regular 5 to 6 nightly basis, which sounds incredible to me, that if that's happening 5 to 6 nights a week, that either the licensing authority or the police authority are not doing anything about it and haven't been doing anything about it for years. That sounds incredulous to me, but you'll have to come to your own judgment on that. And I think where, turning to Councillor Mason's representation, slightly different to what he said in his written representation, so I refer you back to that, where he's effectively saying they can't be blamed for people drinking in the street in the bus stop opposite. In my view, when I read that, and in discussions with Aaron, and it was an acceptance that people are getting drink from elsewhere and they are drinking it in Albert Road, and so the shop can't be responsible for that. And his evidence today is that, oh no, he's sure that these people are buying specific brands of lager, even though in answer to my question he accepted that yes, you could purchase that from other shops, are causing all the issues within Albert Road. It's a 24-hour shop, it will stay a 24-hour shop no matter what your decision, and the issues around the homeless people, the beggars, the antisocial behaviour in and around the vicinity of Albert Road, you cutting the licensing hours back would have no impact on that whatsoever, because we say all of that happens because we're not selling those people the alcohol. We could have got significant support from local people that use this shop. Aaron asked me whether he could get a petition of support, and obviously I've advised him that doing that doesn't really carry much weight, but he has had dozens and dozens of customers coming into his premises telling him how appalled they are that all the blame is being apportioned to his shop. The article in the Portsmouth News, extremely prejudicial. I appreciate they're only reporting what has been written in the representations and the application without doing any further research, but it's just a shame that they have to tarnish his business, which he was fearful would suffer as a consequence of this review application, but in fact the local community, the vast majority of the local community, are right behind him and do not agree with the comments that have been made with the residents that wrote in. You have seen 2 letters from one local business and another local resident, entirely unsolicited by Aranan, so I'm always surprised when you see anything positive written about anything on a licensing application. Usually if people are responding to either a new licence variation or a review, it's just with their negative comments. So I ask you to attach weight to the fact that actually 2 people have taken the trouble to write in to say it is not the shop that's causing a problem locally. Now, just turning to Mr. Aranan, as you can imagine, he has found this whole process just as stressful as he did back in 2014, because for him, he knows you've got the power to actually revoke the premises licence. I've tried to reassure him that in this application, the issue is a narrow one of whether the hours should be cut back, but obviously I have warned him you've got the power to revoke it if you wish. It's entirely within your discretion based on the evidence. So he has had considerable stress over the last few weeks worrying about this application. He said to me this morning when he met me, my heart is absolutely pounding. I haven't been able to sleep. It's had a dramatic effect on him and his staff. He's also said that his premises has been under surveillance. There is a car that has been seen at least on 2 occasions, particularly over this weekend. No idea who it is, whether it's a local resident, whether it's someone from the local authority. We don't know, but there's been a car parked outside specifically with someone observing his premises. And I think it's extremely unfair that he's had to endure these proceedings and endure that kind of scrutiny when he's operated this shop for over 20 years now. He's had a premises licence issued by this authority for 16 years. He's fought off 1 review and now has to fight off a 2nd review. The issues in Albert Road haven't changed over that period of time. Yes, there is antisocial behaviour on occasion. It's certainly not 5 to 6 nights a week. And yes, there is a problem with homeless people and begging. That's not Mr. Aranan's problem. That's a problem for this local authority and the police to deal with. And that is who should be taking action here, not residents reviewing a shop's licence and affecting the livelihood of Mr. Aranan and his family, but also putting an impact on the local community where this is a valued asset of the community, having that 24-hour licence, and particularly during the lockdown and COVID periods where you do have a lot of people working within Portsmouth City Council in the night time, NHS workers, emergency service workers, taxi drivers, everybody in hospitality. There are a lot of people. It's not, as the resident would have you, people on a night out who go and get another drink to take home with them. The vast majority of people buying alcohol at that time of the morning are people who have worked and are finishing their shifts and then going home. So we say there is that positive effect within the local community. As I've said, Mr. Aranan himself is an SIA registered door supervisor, but he does employ additional door supervisors. That's not every night of the week. Friday and Saturday night is when Albert Road is at its busiest, and that's when his door staff are employed. But obviously he's an SIA badge holder and is there, as I've said to you, every night of the week, 7 nights a week. The door staff do their job responsibly. They make sure that individuals are asked to move away from the premises that shouldn't be there or are causing an issue, but ultimately it is not for those SIA registered door supervisors to police Albert Road. They can assist and try and move people on, and usually they are successful in doing that, which is why, although the police have always encouraged Aranan to contact them immediately if there are homeless people outside, people begging, or the antisocial behaviour, as his instructions to me are, a lot of the time they will be able to deal with it themselves and move the people on, and don't need to trouble the police. He's had the same experience actually of when he's called the police when he has needed them to come out. By the time they've got there, which is quite some significant time after, the issue has gone away anyway, because people are not, as the applicant has said, spending hours there. They're coming and I think she contradicted herself later on by saying in one clip, I think they were there for sort of 10 or 15 minutes. Which draws me to my comment about the video you saw, which was appalling, seeing that group of individuals and then the chap urinating in the street. Nobody wants that in their neighbourhood. Mr. Aranan does not want that near his shop. It affects his business. Those issues outside his premises are a detriment to his business, because he doesn't want anybody to be intimidated by what's going on outside. So his interests, and where I said about the shared sort of common interests, his interests are the same as the residents. He doesn't want that outside his shop. It's not making him any money, it's causing him a problem, because he's now had to defend 2 reviews where he's had to pay costs for legal representation to make sure that he can carry on selling alcohol. Now, in that clip, it's alleged that those people were there from 5 o'clock until 8 o'clock in the morning. And when the clip was forwarded by Mr. Stone, he said, well, perhaps your client can view their own CCTV. So I asked Aranan to go back through the CCTV on his external cameras, because he has got a good system internally and externally, and to go back from the point where the group are outside the shop and then go back to where they actually arrive at the area, and then give me 15 minutes before that. So regrettably, he provided me with that footage, and I was intending to show that today. However, we put it on a format to produce, and it effectively doubled the time of the playing of that CCTV, which meant, so we had 37 minutes of CCTV. You would have been viewing it for an hour and 14 minutes effectively on a slower motion, and on the software that my IT guy had downloaded on, we couldn't wind it forward. So I took the decision not to produce it, but it is available. But what I can say is what I've seen, the CCTV runs from 7:15 in the morning. There is absolutely nobody outside the shop at 7:15. It's empty. There are a couple of cars go by. The first person to arrive, there's 2 chaps that were in that group. They arrive at 7:37. They already have alcohol with them, so they're holding a can. One's got a can in his back pocket. A few minutes later, a car arrives, a BMW, which has 2 women in it. The women clearly know the 2 chaps who are outside the Quickie Mart, and they get out of the car and they're chatting. One of the lads gives them a can of drink. Don't know what it is, but we can only assume, as the residents have done, that it's alcohol, but you can't see whether it is or it isn't. And then other people join that group over the course of the next 10 minutes. So that big group started off as 2 males, then 2 females, then later other males joined that group, the last of which joined at 7:52. So they weren't in the area, according to that CCTV, because nobody was there at 7:15. The only thing that was happening was passing traffic. So to say that they'd been partying for 3 hours is just plainly wrong. In conclusion then, my submission on the basis of what's been submitted is the applicant doesn't get her application home. She has not proved, it's more likely than not, that Quickie Mart are selling alcohol to individuals who are causing antisocial behaviour immediately outside the shop. My client is more than happy to continue working with the police and to include any of the residents or local councillors that want to be involved in that discussion. As you've heard, we offered that right from the outset. Having had the first application invalidated, the licensing authority were asked to contact Miss Whiteaway for a meeting, at which we said the licensing authority could be present because we appreciated she may not want to meet us without that support. And then we were advised that was, she refused, and the second application was then submitted within a day. You all know the licensing guidance, and I appreciate it does just talk about responsible authorities, but it talks about early engagement with licence holders to discuss issues which people have got concerns with. Well, Mr. Aranan didn't have any of that. So just completely out of the blue has an application to review his premises licence, does his best to engage, but is unable to do so. So I'm asking that, having heard all of those representations, that you must take no action because the evidence just simply isn't there, and be rest assured that Mr. Aranan will continue working with the police, because on occasion there is issue. The biggest issue is the homelessness and begging, which has nothing to do with the sale of alcohol and has been a problem in Albert Road for a long time and is not his responsibility, frankly. He will help and he will move people on, but it's not his responsibility to solve that problem out. That is the responsibility of this council and the police. I leave the representations there. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. One that's on the top of my mind at the moment, where you just ended about the potentially homeless people that are sat against the shop begging. Obviously, I've seen that quite a lot, probably 90% of the time as I walk past Quickie Mart. If they're sitting against your building, why have you not got rid of them a lot quicker? Because every time I walk past, they always seem to be there, but surely you have some responsibility. Even if they're sat on the street, they're against the building. Like, yeah.
The responsibility is to ask them to move on, which generally they do, but then they come back, then they get asked to move, then they come back. They can't physically remove them, they can't lift them up and go and take them down if they're not going to move. And on occasion when he has contacted the police, and this is one of the issues, so the police have said, oh look, always report it. But over the years, when he's reported that someone's outside, by the time the police get there, they're not there, so they can't deal with it. It's difficult. All they can do is ask the person to move. Generally, there's a conversation, as you saw on the clip with that individual who persistently tried to get into the shop. All they can do is ask them to move. Eventually they do. They can't do anything about them not coming back, which is what that individual did after he'd been told to leave and did leave the area. They're doing their best in difficult circumstances, but the problem is not to do with the alcohol. They're not going there to sit outside because they're going in and buying alcohol from Quickie Mart and then sitting against the wall. And that's where you absolutely, in your determination, that's where your focus has to be, this is about the sale of alcohol. It's not about the homeless and the begging and the antisocial behaviour, unless you think there is enough evidence